I'm Chance Storland, and this is The Docket, our weekly interview program covering law and crime in San Antonio from expressnews.com. Brought to you today by the law offices of Pat Maloney. Indictments have been issued in the death of an 8-month-old San Antonio boy who initially was reported as kidnapped in early January. But just days later, the boy's father led authorities to a field where the child's body was found wrapped and placed in a backpack and buried in the field. I'm joined now by San Antonio Express News courts and crime reporter Elizabeth Zavala to learn more about these new details. So, Liz, great to have you here on the show as always. Unfortunately, we're discussing a very tragic story, but there are new developments that have taken place in this high-profile case. What are they?
Yes, Chance. A Bexar County grand jury has indicted 3 people in connection with the death of baby King J. Davila. Christopher Davila, who's 34 years old, was indicted on numerous charges, including injury to a child causing severe bodily injury, which is a first-degree felony. And this was released to media this week by the Bexar County District Attorney's Office. Now, Christopher Davila and his cousin, Angie Torres, 45, and his mother, Beatriz Sampaio, who's 64, were all indicted on a charge of tampering with evidence for what authorities say were their roles in covering up the baby's death with a fake kidnapping almost 4 months ago. Besides the injury and evidence tampering charges, the indictment charged Davila with possession of a controlled substance and also being a felon in possession of a firearm.
Yeah, this is a big case. As you mentioned, this happened 3 to 4 months ago, but it really hasn't left the headlines. You know, there's been ebbs and flows in the new information that's been coming out. And of course, especially when the baby was reported missing. And then unfortunately, very quickly after, when it was revealed that the baby had been buried in that field. Let's go through some more background on this case. There are a lot of details.
Yes, Chance, it's just really tragic. Such a beautiful little boy. In early January, Christopher Davila called police, and he told them that his car had been stolen from a convenience store. And he told authorities he had run to the store with his son. He left the baby in the car that was still running and went inside. When he came back out, the car and the baby were gone. Well, meanwhile, investigators would come to find out later that Davila's cousin, later identified as Angie Torres, she actually had been arrested on something else. And investigators were able to find out that she actually was dropped off at a nearby street at the same time Christopher Davila arrived at the gas station. And video surveillance from that store showed the woman entered the car and drove off. And investigators said Angie Torres drove the car to an intersection near a West Side park where she walked away with an empty car seat, leaving the vehicle behind. And then, of course, a week later, amid a public outcry and a slew of searches around the city, Christopher Davila led police after his arrest to the child's body, which, as you mentioned, was left in a backpack in a northeast side field. But, regarding that particular arrest and the linking of Angie Torres to this case, was basically, as I said, she had been arrested on some other charge, and investigators were able to look at that surveillance video and then look at Angie Torres and make the link that she was connected to the case.
And so how do these grand jury indictments compare with what was already on the books from before? I know Christopher Davila has remained in jail. I believe his cousin has as well, but his mother has been out on bond for some time.
Yes, she actually is out on bond and she's been ill. But, the grand jury did not indict Christopher Davila on a child endangerment charge, which they had attached to him when he was arrested on January 10th. But the indictments did add a new charge, which is tampering with evidence by concealing a human corpse, which is a second-degree felony punishable by up to 20 years in prison. The indictment alleges Davila knew a missing person investigation was in progress and intentionally concealed the child's body with the intent to impair the investigation. So back to your other question regarding the indictments, all three of them are awaiting arraignment on these particular charges. And as you mentioned, Angie Torres is still in jail. She's being held on a $250,000 bond. And Christopher Davila's mother, Beatrice Sampaio, is ill, and she was actually let out on bond not too long ago because of that illness. Now, Christopher Davila is being held on the bond totaling $1.25 million. And it's possible that could change. But as I said, all three are awaiting arraignment.
And we'll get to more details here shortly. I just want to do point of reference. The indictment is the charges. What is the arraignment?
The arraignment basically is going before a judge or a magistrate to formally, be charged in the particular cases. It's basically a formality that occurs that, you appear before somebody and they say, you have been charged with this particular crime.
So we're moving forward with the different steps in this case, as you just pointed out. And the Express News has covered, every step of this case and will continue to do so. This is not the first time we've been talking about this tragic occurrence on Express News podcasts. What can you tell me about Christopher Davila and the coverage that has been ongoing on this case?
Well, there have been, we have actually covered this case extensively. A couple of reporters have done it. Now that it's cycling its way into the courts, I'm going to be doing a lot of this coverage myself. But it's such a tragic case. And, something about San Antonio is whenever there is a crime of this particular magnitude, especially if it has to do with a child, it's really amazing to see the community come together. People will, they will get on social media. They will participate in searches. They'll do all kinds of things when you have a case like this. So my colleague, Emily Eaton, has written a lot about this case, and including having communications with Christopher Davila from jail. He said in an exclusive letter that he sent to Emily, he said that he was home with King J, who was in a car seat and on a bed while Christopher Davila played video games. He told investigators the child fell from the bed, but he did not attend to the child. Now, in this letter that he sent to Emily and the Express News in mid-February, Davila actually said he left the child unsupervised in an unbuckled car seat on the edge of the bed while he smoked marijuana in the garage to alleviate some back pain. And then he stated that when he went back into the house and he laid on the bed, that his son accidentally died after the child fell from the bed.
And then, Elizabeth, I know firsthand there's been some question recently about King J's paternity. I spoke to Emily Eaton herself just recently on the In-Depth podcast about her research into this area.
Yes, Chance, it's just been really, Emily's done a lot of really good work on this particular, well, Emily does a lot of good work, let's just say that right there. But on this particular case, reaching out to Christopher Davila in jail, and he sent her a letter, was a really good move, for her to be able to contact, him and get, his version of what happened. But also last month, a man by the name of Martin Gonzalez III, a San Antonio man who is serving a 4-year prison term at a Northeast Texas prison, told Emily he believes he actually is King Jay's father, and was really shocked to learn that his estranged wife, Jasmine Gonzalez, sought to divorce him and declare Christopher Davila, who is her fiance, as actually the boy's father. So at this point, it's really unclear which man is King Jay's father, but maybe Emily had talked to you some about this. One of the really chilling things that he had said to her was that he was just really sorry that he was not there to provide, safety for his son, and that he died and with in a situation where he might have not felt like he was loved.
Yeah, it's really quite an interview. It's available online at expressnews.com/podcasts, on a different podcast, the In-Depth podcast, once a week, just like the docket. My discussion with Emily Eaton on that reveal, and just wow. That's all I can say about that. As you pointed out, Emily Eaton does a lot of great work, and that is an excellent example, an unfortunate example of her excellent work. So as we wrap things up here, Elizabeth, what happens next in this case? As you've just mentioned, the paternity is still an ongoing issue. Whether or not Christopher Davila is the biological father of King Jay doesn't necessarily matter for the case, the details that we've already gone through. But it certainly is an interesting twist in a story that is so unfortunate, yet has so many other interesting twists. This really is one of those, I've said it before here on the podcast, sometimes, truth is really stranger than fiction. And this is certainly one of those times.
Yes. I mean, it's just, I know we've talked about it before with a lot of the really heinous cases and that I've covered, and there's really no winners in any of it, even if you get a conviction or something to that effect. But this case is going to be on a lot of people's minds and in their hearts, I believe, for quite some time, because he was an innocent little boy, 8 months old. And, gosh, you think about what kids are starting to do at 8 months old. Some of them are already walking. Some of them are learning to walk. I mean, it's going to be quite the journey, going down toward trial for this. So, as I said earlier, the three, Christopher Davila, his mother, Beatrice Sampaio, and Christopher's cousin, Angie Torres, are yet to be arraigned on all the charges that are against them. We may also see a hearing soon to possibly reduce Christopher Davila's bond, because he's being held on a $1.25 million bond. And, there is there's a lot of press out there, and a lot of cities across the nation that are dealing with, really, really high bonds. But, this is a pretty high profile case. And even though, right now, they're going to be going through a lot of status conferences before this case goes to trial. There's going to be a lot of meetings with attorneys and getting witnesses together. And if convicted of the child injury charge, Christopher Davila faces up to life in prison. The other charges against him have different punishment ranges, with the maximums of the tampering with evidence and the tampering with evidence by concealing a human corpse, those types of things. There's maximum punishments of 10-year prison terms and 20-year terms also for some of these charges. So it's also been discussed and asked whether there could be a capital murder child under 10 charge against Christopher Davila. But it's probably still a little too early to tell whether there will be changes in that regard. But because this has come up some at the courthouse and among, some people that I've talked to about it, injury to a child causing serious bodily injury is a first-degree felony, and it is punishable by up to life in prison. And we've talked about some cases, Chance, that have to do with, children who, people who were charged and convicted in those particular, for that particular charge. One of the cases we talked about, you'll remember sometime last year, was the case of little Josiah Williams. His stepmother, his father, and his grandmother were all convicted of injury to a child, and some even injury by omission. And they saw some pretty high sentences in that regard. You can see a life sentence with some of these charges, injury to a child charges, and you can also you can see life, and you can also see really high number, like 80 years, 90 years. It may not always take you all the way to life, but, those are pretty hefty sentences as well. So I just point that out to people who maybe might be inquiring why there isn't a charge for capital murder child under 10. Now, it still might be too early to tell whether that would change. And I guess I would say, as I always do, just to stay tuned in that regard, because we will be speaking about this case again.
And thank you to San Antonio Express News courts and crime reporter Elizabeth Zavala for joining me for today's episode of The Docket, our weekly interview program covering law and crime in San Antonio from expressnews.com. Brought to you today by the law offices of Pat Maloney. For the San Antonio Express News, I'm Chance Dorland.